So without any further ado, let me start with the agenda. My name is Rob Watt, I'm Managing Partner at MC&C. MC&C, for those that don't know, is the growth agency, an independent media agency who use data-driven insights to fuel strategies for today's brands. We have a panel of experts to talk through a number of subjects today. So I'll do a quick introduction, then I'll hand over to Angie, our Head of Search at MC&C, who's going to talk about automation and machine learning in 2019. Then Paris, the Client Service Manager from Walk, will talk about the reality and expectations and what helps push a trend towards reality. We'll then have a quick coffee break, and you'll see some tables at the back where MC&C will be running some brand health checks. So if you have any burning questions around programmatic, search, social, or any other aspect of digital, please feel free to sit down with the team and they'll answer them. If we can be back here by 10:15 for part 2, that would be great. We've then got a very interactive session with MC&C's 3 strategists, Ben, Christian and Nick, who will be talking about the fads, the trends and the to be confirmed for 2019. Then Sabrina, Agency Development Manager from Google, will talk about how YouTube can convert intent into action with video. So we should be done with that by about 11, 30 minutes for Q&A, and as I said, then a light lunch. Any further ado, let's get going. I hate holding this, by the way. Right. So, fads versus trends. What's the difference and why should it matter? Confusing fads with trends can be a very costly mistake for anyone. For a consumer, it might result in some lost face and maybe taking a financial hit on eBay. But for a business, choosing the wrong fad or misunderstanding a trend can cause significant damage. And it's hard, I think, for marketers in the digital era picking the digital trends from the fads. So sifting out what's relevant and determining where to invest limited time and resources to deliver long-term strategic value becomes really important. So fad and trend are both terms that indicate a rising level of popularity, style and behavior for a product. But the difference between them is crucial, especially when navigating digital transformation. So trying to understand which tech to back. So for those of you that might remember, looking around the faces, maybe not too many, ITV may well have been very smart in seeing quite early that there was a trend for social media and mass communication, but backed the wrong horse when they bought Friends Reunited, a mistake that cost them 173 million. So I think that nuance between seeing a trend and then understanding how to action it is really important. That's what we'll kind of unpack today. So, just quick definitions so everyone hopefully understands the difference between the two. A fad is generally an intensely widely shared enthusiasm for something, but generally is short-lived. You could sum it up, I guess, by calling it a craze. Whereas a trend indicates a general direction of something that's developing, generally quite complex, lots of intersecting concepts that play increasingly relevant roles in various sectors. But the key point is they tend to have longevity. So as consumers, we've all been exposed to fads in our lifetime. If I look about my own experience as a child, I pestered my parents constantly for a chopper bike. They bought me a racer, which was pretty boring. However, I guess that makes me 30 years ahead of the curve. I pestered them for a Rubik's Cube I couldn't solve, a yo-yo I couldn't master, and now my own children at Christmas are, of the last previous years, Hatchimals, fidget spinners, and this year it's all about the Poopsie unicorn. Don't ask. So sometimes what may have been perceived as fads became trends, and I think this is a really good example here. When denim or jeans, which is now considered a lasting trend, started in the 50s, it was initially considered a young person's fad. And its popularity has fluctuated over the years with several different incarnations through flares, acid wash, pinstripe, ripped jeans, but it's never disappeared from popular use and is a 70-year perennial trend. Luckily, unlike the safari suit, bell bottoms and the shell suit, which have disappeared, burnt bright and then faded away, apart from ironic trendies, fancy dress shops and my own wardrobe at a weekend. But sometimes what may have been perceived as a fad actually became trends. And having said that, fads aren't necessarily bad, and they can be very lucrative. Does everyone remember what this is? Which charity is it for? ALS. So this campaign, the Ice Bucket Challenge, went viral in the summer of 2014, lasted a couple of months with huge success. Just to put some numbers against this, 2.2 million Twitter mentions, up to 70,000 a day, 2.4 million individual videos on Facebook, 1.2 million on YouTube, and the ALS Wikipedia page, the hits went up from 163 per month to 2.8 million. But more importantly for the charity, over that period, initially over 1 month, they signed up 739,000 new donors, who over the course of the year delivered 100 million in fundraising. That's 5x what they delivered through the whole of 2013. However, they tried to replicate that campaign in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 with nowhere near the success. So when we look at the trend graph, this is Google Trends, very clearly it looks like a fad that has not sustained over a period of time. Sorry, right one. Diets by themselves, or fad diets, by definition, are a fad, part of the lingua franca. I think what's interesting about diets is they kind of tend to be based on pseudoscience rather than science. They promise longevity, massive weight loss, a change in life. They enter the public consciousness, gain huge popularity. Books, plans, dedicated clubs, and meals in supermarkets, and generally with some celebrity endorsement. But they come as quick as they go. But however, although they are fads, the underlying trend is that as a population, certainly in the Western world, we are becoming more health conscious and concerned about our weight. So that is the underlying trend that continues. The fads will come and go. So trends and fads are both subject to the public's whims and tastes. And in the digital world, rapid changes to technology, both hardware, software, and behavioral components are driving the prevalence of fads that may become trends at an unprecedented rate. So if we take, for example, how the consumption of music has changed over the last 40 years with the advent of the portable music player. So when Sony Walkman brought out this product 40 odd years ago, the reviews were less than positive. It was suggested that it was an unwelcome innovation, but eventually sales picked up, and its emergence marked a vast improvement over the portable 8-track player. But the consumer demand started to drive innovation forward for better quality, lighter devices with more capacity, and drove in turn the introduction of the CD, portable CD, the mini disc, and the first wave of MP3 players. But the missing component for this hardware innovation was software. And I think when Apple brought in iTunes, that really accelerated, and the advent of the iPod really moved music forward and shifted hundreds of millions of devices. And whilst it initially seemed miraculous to be able to carry 4,000 songs in your pocket, the iPod itself was usurped by the mobile phone, the smartphone specifically. So whilst the devices that went before it were considered fad, the underlying trend for portable music has continued. The smartphone, I think, is a really, really fascinating development, as it has kind of to some extent usurped the portable e-reader, and to some extent usurped the camera. So as a one device that has multi-facets, a Swiss Army knife to some extent. And consumer adoption and demand has driven innovation, no question about it. Consumers are more in control than they ever have been. And there's clearly a market for it, but that's not always the case. If you remember when TV wasn't high-end enough unless it had 3D technology and came with a number of glasses with it, it seemed that TV manufacturers had caught onto this wave where consumers were paying a premium for sitting in a cinema and seeing objects come out of the screen, and they thought, we'll have a piece of this. And so for a while, it looked like the future of television would be 3D. By 2013, here's a question. By 2013, how many 3D TVs do you think had been shipped worldwide? Anyone want to hazard a guess? 45 million. I had no baseline for that, so I don't know whether you see that as high or low. However, the reality is the content wasn't there. And it often isn't when a new technology tries to get off the ground, and I think that's something that VR should take heed of. It was expensive. It could cause eye problems and headaches, and it just didn't work very well. But I think the reality for 3D TV was consumers didn't mind a 2-hour-ish experience in the cinema, but didn't want to sit at home with a set of clunky eyewear on them trying to watch TV. And therefore, it's pretty much disappeared. So if we think to the latest fads, trends, arguably the biggest story or tech story in 2017 was the rise and fall of Bitcoin. So over the 12 months in 2017, its value increased over 2,300%, but it's crashed just as quickly, lost 80% of that value. When we look at the Google trend for searches on Bitcoin worldwide, it shows every aspect of looking like a fad, a kind of high peak, burning bright, and then disappearing off. Bitcoin, of course, sits on top of the blockchain. And when I look at the blockchain searches of the same period, it follows a similar pattern. So are we in an era where blockchain is going to go the way of Bitcoin? The only way to look at this sensibly is when I overlay the two searches over the same period together, and you see that Bitcoin hasn't even really begun. Blockchain hasn't even really begun. So whilst we might think Bitcoin currently is a fad, I think it's too early to call whether blockchain is. And I think certainly when we think about how it can be used in marketing terms, which Christian will unpack a bit later, the jury is certainly out. So, digital trends can begin life as fads, whether they be products, features, or user behaviors. But fads only become viable trends when they reach a critical mass and prove their longevity. So what does the future hold for voice, AR, VR, AI, automation, for example? Our panel of experts will unpack this and many more of these in the next 90 minutes or so.